having a wonderful day today because we are going to be diving right in with some phonology for our Flaunal avian culture. So, it's an exciting time for us today. We have discussed a little bit of phonology before, and I would like to give a big thanks to Artifexian and Former for their video on non-human conlangs and phonologies and such. Without this chart that you are seeing right here, at least I hope you are seeing it, yes you are seeing it, this chart you are seeing right here would not be possible. Now I know I've talked a little bit about this before, but I'd like to go into more detail on it at this point. First and foremost, this consonant chart is a list of consonants that I believe are possible. That are possible for speech. Essentially, it's the IPA chart for our Flaunal Avian Society. One thing I mentioned before, and I will again mention, is that our Flaunal creatures have developed speech similar to our avian creatures. So any consonants or vowels are going to be similar enough between them to be indistinguishable. There may be a slight accent at the worst. So these consonants are what I believe to be physically possible for these creatures to create, with rostral following Former's example in the aforementioned video. Rostral meaning beak, and the Koanal series is unique to bird physiology. And I again followed Former's example here and used the our uvular set of sounds to represent those. I also, where we have some differences, I do not believe he used retroflex or lingual rostral, which essentially, in my opinion, would be similar to our dental sounds. But we can do lingolabial sounds. They're just not that common in our own languages. But pa and ba and ma and la, they're possible sounds. They're just not. As someone who has tried to create a language with those before and tried to figure out how those would evolve, they're not exactly intuitive as far as like evolutionary tracks go. I could, but in the absence of dentals, this seems like a fair approximation thereof, and a likely approximation thereof. So you'll also notice that just due to the set of IPA that we are using here, we have a lot of special symbols, so there's going to be potentially a lot of copy and pasting. Now, and that's all just the consonants. Now, moving on to the vowels for a little bit. Our vowels here are, these are just a sampling of vowels. Essentially, I see them as able to I see these creatures as able to make any vowels that we are able to produce. The primary difference being that the only thing that they cannot do is that they do not have lip rounding, since they have beaks. It is possible that our Flaunal creatures could do some form of lip rounding, but at this point there's no reason for them to, because their compatriots cannot make that same sound. So it would be prohibitive for communication if only half of the culture can actually pronounce the only half the culture can pronounce some of the words in the language. So we're going to stick pretty much with just unrounded, and this is just a sample basics of probably what I'm going to start with and move out from and expand as we go in. So we have E, ah, and E. Yeah, I pronounced that right, good. The other thing that we have that I haven't marked down here at all is that we're going to have a robust tone system as we go on. It's something I haven't put in too much. I haven't put in any symbols or anything like that down yet, but that is something that we will look forward to as we continue on, of just as a way to mimic bird speech again. How there are some options we have here, because we are using more of a hummingbird sound, or a hummingbird creature to begin with, and they are not necessarily songbirds per se. We don't have to go with a super high contrast, high contour. I guess contrast is not the right one, but we don't have to go with a lot of contour tones and that sort of stuff. So I'm actually thinking that we might start off with just a level tone system, but with a fair number of level tones, like 3 or 4 to be 3 or 4 level tone distinctions. Is that realistic for human languages? I'm not entirely sure, but again, this is not a human language. We have some more flexibility with things here. So we're going to start by we're going to copy paste what we have here over, and we're going to so we can. This is just a list of possible sounds. I don't want to ruin that, but now we're going to start to pare down what we actually want for this early language. Okay, so we have a lot of options here, as we've mentioned. I'm not sure. What we need to figure out is which set we want to use, because it would not make sense for us to use all of these consonants. That would be a very highly a more complex language. And now, and forgive me for going down there for a moment. I want to grab my calculator, because as we start to figure out potential syllables, I want to figure out just the number of monosyllables we could potentially have in this language. It's something I tend to like to do as we go through, just as a curious experiment. So, we're going to stick with just these basic vowels to begin with, nothing fancy. And I should note that this is, to my understanding right now, kind of fluid between front and back. It is just a generic low sound. I say generic. It is just within that range. And it's possible we might split it into a front-back distinction. Who knows? That could have some potential. So, okay. So let's start by looking at what we have, or I was looking at our consonants. So considering bird sounds, particularly from what I recall of hummingbirds, they're very chittering type. So we definitely are going to want to keep in our trills. And I think we might let that distinguish some of what we have here. So we have the trills we currently have are brr, rah, and let's see if I can do this right. Rah, rah. I can kind of do it right. I can't sustain it long. Rah, rah. There we are. Rah. Not to be confused with our alveolar. Rah, rah, rah. Yeah, that one's going to be tougher to do. That said, I have not done a lip trill in a language yet. At least I have always considered it, but always shied away from it. We are definitely going to make sure we have a lip trill, which I think definitely means that we are going to have our rostral series be in here. So, pa, ba, fa, va, ma, ba, and ma, and ma. Okay, awesome. And again, we'll figure out whether or not we're going to have every manner of articulation as well, particularly with the ejectives and the clicks. Although I think the ejectives particularly would make sense. We'll see if the clicks make sense or not. So, we know we're going to have a rostral series. Do we want to have a lingual rostral series at all? Ba, pa, pa, va, ma, la, ba, ma, ma. Ba. Let me take off my headphones for a moment. Ba, va. It's an option. I'm not sure how much we'll need it, but it is something to consider. Yeah, that's gonna be the hardest part of figuring out. We have a list that is small compared to the IPA I am used to working with. However, it is still quite large. If we were to use every single sound we have here currently, let's see, we have 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20, 25, 30, 35, 39, 43 sounds. Even if we were to just do a simple 129 syllables, if we were to just go with a CV language, I don't know how much. That's a lot for considering that's just 43 consonants feels like a lot. I'm not gonna lie. At least to start off with, we want to start off with a more simple-ish language. So I think we should go with at most 3 manners, or 3 places of articulation. We said we're definitely going to do the rostral. I think choanal also makes sense to do. So that leaves one of these, either palatal, retroflex, or linguorostral. So if we know we have currently a pa and ga, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Our other options would be kya, da, and ba. On the large, I'm leaning towards either palatal or linguorostral. And I think we're going to go palatal for the sheer fact of that means that we definitely get a approximant in there. Although if we didn't go with that, and again, we could pull like 1 or 2 small things from the places of articulation that we don't use writ large. Like we could go with linguorostral and still pull in one of these approximants. I don't think that's what I want to do right now, at least. So I think for this language, we are going to take out these. I'm going to leave our clicks in here for just a moment because I have some possibilities. So our current sounds with this would be our stops would be pa, ba, kya, ya, kya, 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 ya, ya, kya, kya, kya. Kya and gya, gya, ka and ga, kya, kya, ka and ga, ga. And then our fricatives would be fa and va, hya, and ya, ha and ra, ra. I'm hoping I pronounced these as accurately as I feel like I am. Nasal, ma, ya, ga, ra. Trills, we have brr and ra, bra and ra. Approximants, we have ya. Laterals, we have ra and ra, and ra. Adjectives, we have a, kya, ya, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that one correctly. We'll come back to that one. And okay. And then clicks, we have and yeah, okay. And okay. Do I want clicks? I think we're going to say no to clicks right now. Right here, let's at least... Well, Yeah, we're going to say no to clicks for our initial language. So I do think I'm going to leave in the adjectives, though. Uh, 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 and Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm worried that my palatals and choanals are going to start sounding like velars when I speak. I hope that's not the case. This will be a good practice, because I normally stick to English-based manners of, or places of articulation. So this is somewhat of a stretch to have not just, or to have only one place of articulation that is not English-based. I realize that there are some sounds in here that we use in English, either allophonically or even as allophones or as specific phonemes. But by and large, most of these sounds in these series we do not use in English, at least on a regular basis. So, or at least on an intentional basis, let me put it that way. So with this, that gives us, let's see, 6, 12, 18, 21, 24, 25, 26 consonants. So we have enough consonants. We have as many consonants as there are letters in the English alphabet. Nice, I can work with that. And then 3 vowels. So if we were to just go with a simple CV language, we would end up with 78 different consonants. I can work with that. That's not a bad starting spot. We'll do more with phonotactics in a moment. Talk about whether or not we want consonant clusters or diphthongs in any way, or and what we want for codas, for coda consonants and such. But this is not a bad way to start. The other thing that we should mention is tone, as we get into our sounds, and I believe, do we want a 3 or 4 tone distinction? So do we want high, mid, low, high, mid, low, ha, 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 ha. That's a tough one. For my hearing, or my quick hearing, high, mid, low makes more sense. However, I'm almost tempted to go high, mid, low, mid, low. You know what? Since this is my first language we're working with tone, we're just going to stick with simple high, mid, low. Nothing more fancy than that. We're just going to write high, mid, low distinction. Not certain I misspelled distinctions correctly, but we'll look at that. No, it looks like I did. Okay, awesome. Good. Good. Okay, so our next thing to work on, we have all of these options here are high, mid, low distinctions in tone. Next would be phonotactics, or discussing some basic phonotactics. So things like syllable structure, primarily syllable structure would be where we should start with. So such like CV would be we cannot go smaller than that. And that's, actually no, this is as small as we can possibly go in my opinion. Which would actually give us 3 more syllables on top of the, which would bring us to 81 syllables if we go with this distinction. So that is our starting reference point. I think that is smaller than I would like. At the very least, I want to have codas. At the very least, I want to start off. Oh, hello. Okay, at the there we are. So that would give us 2,187 different consonants, or syllables. That is very workable, at least for an early language. Okay. Do we want to define a more lengthy structure? Like, do we want to define, like, words, do we want to go ahead and define some basic word structures or such to begin with? I'm thinking probably not at this point. So we're going to start with just CVC. Yeah, we'll start here, and we can work our way out from here. Oh, actually, hold up. I need to multiply this times 3 because I did not include tone in there. When you add in tone, that brings us to over 6,500 different potential syllables. That is a very workable beginning. With a fairly simple structure, so I'm actually pretty happy about that. One thing to consider is tone going to have a regularity to it, or is it going to be, as I create syllables and other morphemes and such, I'm just going to assign random tones to each one? Or is there going to be a method to my madness? Is there going to be a method to the language's madness, such as like a regular tone system, such as a pattern of mid, high, mid, low, mid, low, mid, low, or something like that. It's a good question. Brahma, brimi, prima, primami, primafi, primafi, primani, primani, primari, primaco. Ah, that uvular consonant is not easy to pronounce. I have to think about that one. Ka, ko, ko, ki, prima, ki, ki, prima, ki, maki, ki. Okay, I can see that. Q, E, 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 E. I think I'm pronouncing that back vowel correctly. It's not what I'm used to pronouncing, if you cannot tell. Okay, so we'll come back to that. So, tones. How are they going to work in this language? So we do have as I mentioned earlier, we could do a pattern where which tone follows a pattern for each word. Another thing we haven't considered yet either is stress in these words, whether or not we're going to have a stress distinction. I'm almost tempted to say no, however, that would give us some variation and some focus into the words that we can utilize later as we evolve the language. If I was to do it, it would definitely be a pattern stress, not a lexical stress, and it would mean that I would not do a pattern tone system as well. So if I was to do something, I would do like penultimate stress or anti-penultimate stress or something like that. if I was basing this language after a songbird, I would say we would want something to be patterned, whether it be tone or whether it be a stress system. Because we're following this after a hummingbird, however, I think we're going to not do a stress distinction at this point in the language. One may evolve in sister language or daughter languages from this, but I don't think from our early language we're going to have a stress distinction. I think we're also not going to have a tone pattern. We're going to essentially assign tones to individual words. Yeah. Because that might give us some potential options later on that I have ideas for, such as using analogy or back referencing. I forget the actual term, but essentially where you start to notice a pattern in certain sets of words, and patterns could evolve from those. So I think I like that idea, where we start off with no tone pattern, and one just evolves. One may evolve in a daughter language. And, my apologies. I had to clear my throat there. There we are. Okay. So. Okay. So starting off with basic Cvc language. I think we're going to start with basic, with not much in the way of concept of phonotactics, and we'll evolve those as we go, as we evolve the phonology later on. Yeah. This will provide us some good options, because this means that, like, yeah, this provides us some good options, and allows us to, and as we evolve the language, phonotactics will start to evolve, so we can start from a basic simple of, hey, anything's allowed, because it's an early language, and things are just starting out, and from this, we'll figure out what works, what doesn't. It's a little bit of a simplistic approach to it, in my opinion. However, it is an effective one. I've used it before, and it can produce decent results of where phonotactics evolve over time. And of course, we can figure out we can also have some influence of that, some artistic license of saying, we want some of these phonotactics to evolve, so how do we make that happen? So yeah, that's where we're going to start with this. So, okay. Going back to our goals, we have established that yes, this is going to be a tonal language, and highly tonal at that. Ooh, we did say it was going to be highly tonal. I still think I want to stick with high, mid, low distinctions. We might, if we do anything more, that would happen as we evolve. But we're going to stick with high, mid, low, and keep it at that for now. We have worked on a gender system. We've actually established that we're going to have, for sure, we're going to have a Flaunal Avian distinction. I'm still not certain that we're going to have a masculine-feminine distinction in this language, but we are. I know we're going to have an inanimate. We know we're going to have at least one of these, an inanimate or an animate distinction, likely both. And again, we'll discuss more of those as we start getting into some more of the nitty-gritty of things. We have worked some on honorifics and formality. That's what we've been working most this week. We're taking a little break from it today. Although since we're kind of running to where we're at on phonology without us starting to assign actual phonemes to words, or starting to actually create morphemes, we're going to stick with, we might come back and look more at that for the rest of the hour as well. And we have talked briefly about case. We have discussed that And we've essentially discussed what these are going to evolve from, which is not a bad way to start. And we'll move more from there as we continue on. This is really just, this is waiting to see how it's going to interact with genders and such, and honorifics. And once I figure out somehow how these are going to work, that's going to be that's going to lead into more changes that I'd want to know somewhat about before we get into actual phonology. So let's talk some more about our titles. I think I'm going to stay away from some of the familial stuff because we haven't talked much about how we're going to do politeness or just non-familial titles and honorifics. For instance, ones for... so we know that this culture is has started, at least we are focusing on a section of it that has started to settle down in a Mesopotamian-esque culture, or Mesopotamian adjacent. The culture is not similar, but essentially same tech levels and that sort of stuff. And so from there we would have yes, so we'd have hunters would be a... So let's actually just consider jobs for a moment. Potential jobs. We know that hunters, for sure. Hunting would still be an avid profession for these creatures. We would also have ranchers. No. We would have ranchers as well. And to a lesser extent, farmers, although those might get lumped under ranchers for the sheer fact of the only reason that the society is actually doing any farming of any sort is to grow food for their domesticated animals. That said, shepherds would also be a likely factor in all of this, because those do not require the farming aspect. I'm still not certain if this civilization has developed any form of farming or not. I think it's likely they have. And I'm not certain if they are using any farming for... I'm not sure if they are farming for anything other than food for animals. One thing I have not considered much about is, does our Flaunal species eat fish? If so, there would be fishers, or fishermen of sorts. Not of sorts, there would be fishermen, and that would be a potential profession. At this point, I don't see why they couldn't eat fish. I don't see a reason why that would be a hindrance to their diet. It may not be what they prefer to go after, but I think as they start to evolve cities and such, it'd be an easy source of food without having to do the long hunting jobs. So it'd be an easy transition to maintain their hypercarnivorous diet while still affording them some sedentarism. In a way that a hunter could not. So, and even that shepherds would be limited on. So shepherds, ranchers would definitely be... so shepherds, ranchers, fishermen. I think... I'm trying to... So, in human culture, we do farming for our own sustenance, but we also have non-food products that we raise on farms. I'm thinking cotton, tobacco... why am I blanking on any others? Hemp, and others such as those. Why am I blanking on? Oh, rubber would be another big one. And so those would be potential sources of, or potential things that these creatures could farm. I don't know how far we are into that. It also provides an interesting question of, do these creatures wear clothes. It's not something we've discussed before or talked about. If so, there would be a whole thing. I mean, there'd be a whole tradition of weaving and tailors and such, or at the very least, leather workers. Ooh, I do see leather workers being an option. Maybe being an option. Because I could see that as they go on, they could see that, hey, the flesh of an animal may not be as nice to eat, but it could be usable. And actually, that also goes back to another point. We have not discussed whether or not, we have only mentioned the question of whether or not these species cook. We have not gotten too far into that. Whether our Flaunal society, or Flaunal creatures cook. We know that our avian creatures would have no need for cooking because their primary, well, actually I take that back slightly, but their primary diet is the nectar of their Flaunal hosts. However, they do eat and they do groom their fellow Flaunal plants by eating the bugs that are on them and protecting them that way. It is possible that those bugs could learn to, or that they could learn to catch and cook bugs, and essentially be an insect rancher. I can see that being a very feasible option. Yeah, that's actually a very potential option. So you would have, yeah, I'm liking that idea. But whether or not they cook those bugs, it's also saying that as I mentioned, that they might be, if we start to live in bedrooms, bugs might become less and less, or as the society evolves, bugs will be less of a food source, or less and less a hazard as far as like on a person. I'm sitting here inside. I'm not worrying if there's bugs on me. When I'm outside, I mean, yeah, there's likely to be bugs on me when I'm out camping and such, but in my day-to-day living, I don't worry about bugs. So I could see that a slow thing of, it becomes less of a grooming thing, and there actually has to be some more. I can see that becoming a replacement. So actually, yes. Okay, let's start noting. Let's go over to culture notes. Okay. So cooking. I think we should go for it. I think cooking would be a fun thing for us to consider. It does mean the use of fire, which is going to be interesting for plants particularly. However, as I say that, we burn too. Differently from how a plant burns, granted. We don't start fires with animal parts, generally speaking. So in that way, fire might have some interesting cultural aspects, though. And I'm not sure that they need to cook their food, or they need to do much cooking. But I do think that some cooking has evolved and come into being. So let's see. So we have cooking. Let's discuss food sources. Food sources and procurement. So, let's start with our Flaunal creatures. Flaunal diet, because this is easy. Meat. They are hypercarnivores. They're hypercarnivores and they are autotrophs at the same time. They produce their energy. They produce a fair amount of their energy through photosynthesis. However, due to their size and need for nutrients, they get the rest of their energy and nutrients from the consumption of meat. So, literally, meat and sunlight is their diet. Well, actually, we're going to do this. Shoopa-doopa-doo. That meat is going to largely come from hunting game, fishing, shepherding, misspell shepherding, yay. Sure. Shepherding and ranching. And so as they start to learn to cook, that would allow for use of other. That would allow for, if they understand like preparation of meat and such, that would allow for a natural progression for, hey, we have this leather lying, or we have this skin lying around. What can we do with it? We have these bones lying around. How can we utilize those? So more than just eating straight off the raw animal. As they would have historically done. Avian Diet. So, we start here with Flaunal nectar. That is their primary diet. However, there is also insects. Groomed from Flaunal host, and that would either be like their spouse or it would be their parent, whichever, depending on their current life stage. But yeah, groomed from Flaunal host and or raised on farms. Or, yeah, we'll say ranches here because that again fits. So yes, so that kind of gives us this. Let's head back over to our languages with our potential jobs here. So these would be our few food procurers. Leatherworking would be a potential job. I don't know if we have any blacksmiths at this point in our history, which sounds odd for Mesopotamian culture. However, I'm just not sure that there's much need. We do have woodworkers, because we do need either woodworkers or stonemasons. Because we do need some way to build homes. And wood is a easy enough material to gain. Oh, but if they have... Hold up, if they have those sort of tools, those will require metal tools. So yes, there would have to be blacksmiths. Actually, there may not be. If they're working, they are potentially gathering a lot of leather. At least any society that is not doing primarily fishing for their meat sources would be procuring a fair amount of leather. Thus, leather-based housing would be practical. And as I say that, you wouldn't have a house just straight up made of only leather. You would have some sticks or something else to secure that. And you would want some way to reliably be able to gather such sticks. If there's bamboo nearby, that could potentially be a source. However, you would still, again, need a reliable way to harvest that bamboo. The only way I am currently aware of would be to use metals. So in that case, you would have blacksmiths. So, what would blacksmiths do besides making and maintaining tools? They would be working with a fire constantly. I'm low-key tempted to say they'd be chefs as well. However, that doesn't quite feel right. To my mind, there should be a very clear separation between a cooking fire and a blacksmith fire. And also, as I say this, there would also be a difference in heat needed. You don't need near the amount of heat in order to... you don't need near the amount of heat in order to maintain a cooking fire as you do for a blacksmith fire. But that said, hold on, let me move down. We are going to need, we're going to put chefs on here. I'm not sure how much that's going to be like a specific job versus just something that some people might do. But it is something to keep in mind. Okay. So we have leatherworking, we have blacksmiths, we would have our leather workers, tanners. Let's use our tanners, carpenters and lumberjacks, as well as why am I blanking on what this other thing would be? Carpenters, lumberjacks, miners, and stone workers. Or stonemasons. And then that's not also getting into local leaders of tribes and villages and cities and such. Okay, so I think this is a good place to start with this. So we definitely know that leaders of various sorts will get honorifics of their own. It is possible that we'll have job-based honorifics as well, and we're also only primarily considering Flaunal jobs here. We haven't talked much about avian jobs and roles. So that's something we're going to want to keep an eye out, our minds on as we move forward on this. However, I think this is about where we're going to end it for today. Thank you for everyone who joined me. I'm not sure what we'll be discussing on this channel next or come Monday, but you can join me here at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time to see more of my creative works here. Otherwise, I'm about to hop on to Twitch after this to stream some game. I haven't decided on that yet either. We'll find out in a moment. It's about 10 or so minutes. But thank you for everyone who joined me today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your days, and